Hello there. I want to take this time to invite you and your family to join me for the next half hour as we read, we study, and we meditate upon the Word of God together. The title of my sermon, What Do You Do When You Are on the Very Brink of Disaster? And when all the warning signs seem to indicate that a major catastrophe was imminent unless you take immediate and decisive action to prevent it from happening. Perhaps it's this inherent God-given ability that man has to be able to reason and formulate within his own mind a solution and a plan that will help him eliminate his problem. And man's success in being the most dominant species on the earth has been his ability to believe in himself. He truly believes that whatever he can conceive and believe, he can achieve. And it's this personal belief in himself and his abilities which has enabled him to bring the other species which share this earth with him under his subjection and control, even though they may be a lot bigger and stronger than he is. And this accomplishment on the part of man of being the most dominant species came about despite the fact that he's the new kid on the block. According to scientists, man's existence on planet Earth is no more than 1 million years. And his accomplishments are something that he should be proud of, and he is. But the thing about it is, his action of self-appreciation, at times it becomes excessive, and it progresses to the point that he becomes obsessed with narcissism or self-love, and which, if it is not brought under control, will lead to pride. A trait which has been man's Achilles heel throughout the centuries, which has led to his downfall on many occasions. For as it states in the 16th chapter of Proverbs and the 18th verse, pride goes before destruction, and haughtiness before a fall. And that's a principle that applies to everyone, whether you are a poor man or a rich man, a beggar or a king. And there was a rich and powerful king who lived many years ago, who can attest to the fact that there is a power that exists that is far greater than one's own power. And that mighty power resides in Jehovah God, the God of the universe. Now this narrative begins with a king, a mighty king that ruled a mighty nation. He was King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. Now this king was blessed by God, and he seemed to prosper at everything that he did. He seemed to have the Midas touch. But then he got the big head, and he got full of himself and full of pride. And he began to think that his blessings came about solely as the result of his own ingenuity, strength, and power. Well, the Spirit of God paid a visit to King Nebuchadnezzar one night and revealed to him in a dream that he could not understand, but he knew it had to do with him, and he sensed that it did not bear good tidings for him. And so he sent for a man of God, a prophet by the name of Daniel, to come and interpret his dream for him. Well, the prophet Daniel came, and he listened to King Nebuchadnezzar reveal his dream unto him, and then he told the king, what you heard and what you saw in your dream was a revelation from God. For you see, King Nebuchadnezzar had an attitude that displeased God. and God thought it was necessary to put the king in check and to let the king know that he was simply a mortal man, and it was God himself who made him, and it was God who had the ability and the power to bring him all the way down in order to destroy the sin of pride which was residing in the king. And the prophet Daniel told the king that very shortly a military coup would take place that would result in the king being driven from the palace and from his position of being king of Babylon. How severe would that punishment be? And his fall from grace? Well, the prophet Daniel told him that he would lose his mind, and the loss of his mental facilities would last for some 7 years, during which time his body would be wet with dew, and his hair would grow as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails would be like birds' claws. Well, King Nebuchadnezzar heard the prophecy from the man of God, and it brought about great concern on his part. But he took some solace in the fact that the prophet also said that it was a learning process that he would have to go through. And it was for King Nebuchadnezzar's benefit. For the prophet Daniel also told him that the king would get his kingdom back again, but not until the king came to the realization that heaven rules. And it was God, and God alone, who has the final say in the affairs of men. Now you might say, did this really happen? Or was this simply a folklore that has been passed down through the centuries? Well, the answer is, it's true. And a descriptive account of this event can be found in the 4th chapter of Daniel and the 28th through the 37th verse. But all these things happened to Nebuchadnezzar. 12 months after this dream, he was strolling on the roof of the royal palace in Babylon and saying, I, by my own mighty power, have built this beautiful city as my royal residence and as the capital of my empire. While he was still speaking these words, a voice came down from heaven. O King Nebuchadnezzar, this message is for you. You are no longer ruler of this kingdom. You will be forced out of the palace to live with the animals in the fields and to eat grass like the cows for 7 years until you realize that God parcels out the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he chooses. That very same hour, this prophecy was fulfilled. Nebuchadnezzar was chased from his palace and ate grass like the cows, and his body was wet with dew. His hair grew as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like birds' claws. At the end of 7 years, I, King Nebuchadnezzar, looked up to heaven, and my sanity returned. And I praised and I worshiped the Most High God and honored him who lives forever, whose rule is everlasting, his kingdom evermore. Yes, I learned my lesson. For I realized that no one can stop him or challenge Jehovah God. What do you mean by doing these things? When my mind returned to me, so did my honor and glory and kingdom. My counselors and officers came back to me, and I was reestablished as head of my kingdom with even greater honor than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and glorify and honor the King of heaven, the judge of all, whose every act is right and good. For he is able to take those who walk proudly and push them into the dust. And no one is exempt from the chastisement of God if he deems it necessary in order to prove his point to you. And this truth is made known to us by another king, a king who was beloved by God, but yet, whenever he got out of line and did things that displeased God, even he had to be put in check. And I'm referring to King David of Israel. For he tells us in the 75th Psalm and the 6th and 7th verses, "For promotion and power come from nowhere on earth, but only from God. He promotes one and deposes another." For you see, you are either going to do it God's way or you are going to hit the highway, heading toward destruction and shame. And disobedience on one's part is an abomination in the sight of God, and it's also a sin. And this is revealed to us in the 4th chapter of St. James and the 17th verse. Remember, knowing what is right to do and then not doing it is sin. And many of the problems people face today is the direct result of their stubbornness and wanting to do it their way instead of the way that it should be done. It's like when you are driving your car and you see a road sign ahead which says you should not exceed 35 miles an hour in that area. It's to your advantage not to exceed that speed limit and for you to heed the warning. For there were experts in the field of traffic, speed, and safety who had deemed it necessary for you to drive at that speed in order for you to have a safe journey through that area without endangering your life or the lives of others. For as the result of the survey and the recommendation of those safety experts, it was agreed upon that it was in the public's best interest to drive at 35 miles an hour instead of at 65 miles an hour. These experts realized that as you increase in speed, the chances are it will increase your odds of being involved in a fatal accident. And it can bring about a premature death, not only for yourself, but the innocent lives of others. And because of God's love for you, He wants the very best for you, not only here on earth, but God also wants to provide you with a way of having eternal fellowship with Him in heaven after your tenure here on earth comes to an end. And He has provided a blueprint showing you a way for you to enjoy the very best of this world and the world to come, if you are willing to follow the instructions that He has placed before you. Instructions which, if you are willing to follow, will help you be successful in life, not only in the eyes of men, but more importantly, in the eyes of God. And one of the key elements to your success lies in your willingness to follow the instructions that God has provided for you, which contains one of the keys to your success. It's the infallible Word of God, the Holy Bible. And in the 29th chapter of Jeremiah, and the 11th through the 13th verse, God is saying to you, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. In those days when you pray, I will listen. You will find me when you seek me, if you look for me in earnest." Yes, He says, I will be there for you even in your most stressful and trying hour.